All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of In the Fighting Chair. We're streaming live from Living Sharks Museum in Westerly, Rhode Island. My name is Keith Cowley. I'm the curator here at Living Sharks Museum. We are considering ourselves America's first shark history museum. And during this time period with COVID-19, the pandemic, we unfortunately are closed to the public. So we started to get creative to find different ways to reach out to our audience. And In the Fighting Chair was born. We've had the honor to have some amazing guests on our show, spanning all walks of life in the world of sharks, covering shark history, shark conservation, shark science, as well as sharks in cinema. And today, actually, we are very excited to have Mr. Joe Alves on the show today, the production designer from Jaws, along with Dennis Prince, the author of Joe Alves' latest book, Designing Jaws. So without further ado, I'm going to bring them on and we're going to let the stories roll. If you have questions, any comments you want to add during the stream, you can in the comments box. And if we can get to them, we certainly will. At the end of the interview, we'll take some time to answer some questions from the public.
Hello.
And welcome, Joe.
Hi.
And hello, Dennis.
So,
Hey, good afternoon.
you're going to talk about Jaws, I guess?
Sure. You want to talk about sharks? We haven't done that in a while.
Seems like a good topic to chat about. Maybe we all have something in common.
Sure.
I'd really like to talk about, as an artist, where your art skill comes from. Joe, when did you first start realizing you had an artistic skill?
I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I always drew. And when I was in grammar school, 4th or 5th grade, I drew all the dwarfs, big full-size kind of, of the seven dwarfs, and they put them on the wall. And then I continued in high school. I was the president of the poster committee. And just drawing was always something I could do. Then I majored in architecture, minored in drama, because I knew when I went to get into theater. But then I went to Chenard's Art Institute, which was really great back in the 50s. It became Cal Arts. And drawing was just something I could do, I mean, I thought I was an adequate illustrator. When I started working in the film industry, I worked with some really great ones like George Jensen and, whatever, Tom Wright. But I got by pretty well.
Did you have a favorite subject you like to work with, or did it all revolve around cinema?
Well, my interest was really in cinema. So whatever it took. To be in the art department, you either had to be a draftsman or an illustrator. And so basically, when I went around with my portfolio, and the head of the drafting room said, "Are you an illustrator or a draftsman?" And I said, "Well, I'm not quite sure," because what I did is I worked in the little theater and I did the sets and I did illustrations and I did also the plans to build the sets. So he took me in the back room and he showed me these incredible illustrations from John DeCure did on Cleopatra. I mean, he's probably one of the best illustrators that have lived. And he said, "This is a typical illustration." And I reacted by saying, "Well, I guess I'm a draftsman," So that's the way it went. But, it became easier to become an art director as a draftsman than an illustrator. So anyway.
Of course, we all know your illustrations now have played out in Jaws, but you actually had like 20 years of experience prior to that. What are some of the highlights that paved the road for you?
Well, I don't know where to start. First, I started at Disney's when I was 19, and that was a fluky thing because I was in art school and finished that semester, and I didn't want to go back home because I was in LA and I wanted to stay there. And a friend of mine said that his wife, his father worked at Disney, and maybe I could get a summer job there. I thought, cleaning, sweeping up or something. And it happened that he was the guy that did the hiring for the artists. And so I called him. He said, "Well, bring in your portfolio." And I was just turned 19, and I got out of high school. I was just 17. So I said, I didn't know if I was ready. "Oh, no, bring your portfolio." So he looked at it, and he said, basically, you're too late for the training program where they teach you how to draw Mickey Mouse and stuff. And normally in animation Disney, you're a trainee for a few months, and then you become basically an illustrator for a year. I mean, in-betweener. You draw in between the lines for a couple of years, and then a breakdown artist, and then after many years, you become an assistant animator, and then an animator. So it's a long process. But anyway, without getting into a long story, he put me in this room with this woman, Marion. I remember her name. And I said, "What do I do?" And we're at this table with the glass and the lights, and said, she said, "You flip the pages and draw in between." Oh, that's pretty easy. Now, she was working for Dwight Carlisle, who was an older assistant animator working for Josh Metter, who was like the king of effects animators. He did the Night on Bald Mountain, he did Fire and Bambi, and he's a pretty accomplished artist. So after a few weeks, Marion said, "I got to leave." So she had to leave to go someplace. So she quit. And they had me working for Dwight. So right away, I'm now being a breakdown artist for his assistant animator. And I'm working with him, and they're doing a thing for MGM, Forbidden Planet. And they're doing this id. And it had to be rendered. It was on wide telescope, technoscope paper. And they didn't want to ink and paint, so everything had to be rendered in 2 layers for the dark, the red and the blue thing. So the fire kind of thing. Anyway, after about another month or so, we had to go to the hospital, and now I'm assisting Josh Metter. I mean, I'm 19 years old. I've been there a couple months, and I'm assisting the best. So I just jumped. So I started drawing the id, and that became pretty famous in motion picture. And so I was at Disney's for a while. I do have one story about Disney. I was working on Sleeping Beauty, and one of the princesses holding up a cookie. And I'm drawing the cookie, and this guy reaches over and said, "No, the cookie should look like this." And it was Walt Disney. And Walt used to walk around and correct drawings, and everybody called him Walt. So I said, "Oh, okay, thank you, Walt." So anyway, that would last for a couple of years, but I really wanted to get into live action, and so I went to work at a little theater, Hollywood Playhouse, and I designed the sets, and also did freelance animation at the same time. I did work in Vertigo. I did the flowers spiraling down. So anyway, that's how it started.
So clearly you have a lot of stories to tell. And
Well,
actually,
I do.
in regards to Jaws, there's a lot of stories that actually haven't been told as well until more recently, as people have been more interested in learning how Jaws came to be from, we'll say, the backside of production. Dennis, can you tell me a little bit of your first encounter meeting an icon like Joe Alves?
Yeah, this was in 2014. He and I were both going to be at a show in Kentucky. I hadn't
Louisville,
met,
wasn't it?
yeah, Louisville, Kentucky, right? Yeah, that was Wonderfest. Little plug for those guys.
Okay.
So I was releasing another book about Aurora model kits, and I saw that Joe was also on the guest list, and I had these notions of, wow, what if I meet Joe Alves? I mean, I had written him a fan letter in 1989, to which he responded magnificently. That was so fun. So here's an opportunity to meet this guy, and I think, well, maybe I'll meet this guy. And wow, what if someday I could do a Jaws book? And if you read the preface of Designing Jaws, you see that, since I was a 12-year-old kid, I just got consumed by this picture. Anyway, I did have a chance to meet him. I was introduced to him. We had lunch together.
We had lunch. I was sitting across from Jim Diamond.
Yeah. Bill Diamond. Yeah, Bill Diamond.
Bill Diamond from, and you were over to the right of him. I can remember this specifically. You're over there, and Jim Diamond, and who did the,
he did Dark Star, or Dark Crystal, excuse me. He did a lot of work with Henson. Okay.
Yeah, with Jim Henson and stuff.
Yeah,
anyway,
so
we
meet, and this funny thing is that, as he says, so I'm kind of like this person kind of soaking it up, realizing, wow. And just a real quick little anecdote here is that I kind of farther away, and they're all chatting amongst themselves, and then I chimed in on some comment, and then Joe turns and he looks at me, right, and he starts answering, and I'm kind of like, is he talking to me? And so we start to have this conversation. Anyway, it all culminates that we end up with a 3-hour plane ride out of Louisville. And we sat together. He invited me to sit with him. We sat together and we chatted for 3 hours nonstop. And I decided to pop the question, have you ever decided or thought about doing a book? Boom. But to the point, Keith, is that I thought about Joe as he's that Jaws guy, but as I spent those 3 hours with him, and he told me about Disney, and he told me about working with Alfred Hitchcock, and he told me about John Carpenter, and he told me about John Ford. He told me about, I thought, you've got such an amazing story beyond Jaws. And like I said, you could spend a lot of time with Joe, and you'll just say, what? And then what happened?
Well, Dennis had written like 14 books for Hewlett Packard technical books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess what happened, they moved, and so he had time off, and he started writing the biography. And I got to tell you, with his writing, it's so complete, and especially the way he lays things out. I mean, he'll have a picture, and then something, he'll have a little space, he'll write that. I think what was interesting about the book is I told him these stories and how he used it. Like, for an example, how did I get interested in being an art director or in movies?
Mm. And
I told him the American in Paris story. And basically, when I was 14, a little theater here in California, it was a small town at the time, and girl who lived up the street, Shirley, and we walked down late Saturday afternoon, early evening, and we saw American in Paris. And we were just delighted. We kept singing and dancing. I really liked to dance when I was in high school. And then I found out it wasn't made in Paris at all. Who's this Cedric Gibbons and his art director? And I found out that they had made Paris at the MGM backlot and in the sound stages. And I thought, wow, that's a cool thing to do. And so Dennis sort of took these things, and what I think what he did so well is to introduce the whole structure of the studio system, where there's like 7 major studios: Paramount, MGM, Fox, Warner Brothers, and how you start in different departments as a junior set designer or a junior camera operator or loader or in editing and everything. And that's the way it went. And then as you were a junior, when the picture that you're working on finished, they let you go, and you went looking for a job, got into a union, and they say, oh, MGM's hiring, they need draftsmen on Mutiny on the Bounty. And then you do that, so that was finished. And so basically, what he did so well in the book is not just talk about me, but the whole structure of how it used to be, how you became a staff person. You didn't go out and get an agent and get jobs. You were in a department, and the head of the department would say, okay, Joe, you're going to do this. are you going to do that? And it's well illustrated in the biography, which he did so well. Do you have want to add on that?
Yeah, no, the only thing to say is, okay, so there's the Catalina edition, right? And that actually was the beginnings of what we've got in the Designing Jaws, the Titan edition, which thankfully Titan got wind of the Catalina edition, which was created specifically for that Catalina Island Museum exhibition. Titan got a hold of it and said, "Hey, can we publish this?" And we said, "Hey, sure, but let's make it a little bit bigger," because I know it's corny, but I always tell Joe, you're going to need a bigger book because he just has so much material, right? And there's even more material still. But anyway, so that what you just showed, Keith, was the bare beginnings for this book.
Before that, though, Julie, who ran the museum in Catalina, had contacted me first. We were doing a screening of Close Encounters, and so we went and we did a book. Dennis did a book on Close Encounters with great illustrations, George Jensen and stuff. And the problem with that, so we were selling that book, but the problem with that was basically Wyoming Park Division had flew me up to the park and had me walk around the park the same way I did 40 years earlier to discover Devil's Tower. So the problem was I had photographs of Steven Spielberg and Vilmar Zsigmond and just my own photographs. And so when the Park Commission put together a video advertising, come and see our parks, Yellowstone, and here's Devil's Tower, they had my pictures, and Sony said, no, you can't use them. We own everything. Well, they didn't even own the movie at that time. It was Columbia. So Dennis was really concerned, and so we had to do that ourselves. So we sort of snuck it in. We self-published it, and so that was Close Encounters book.
Right. There you go.
It was great. And so we ran out of that because we had to pay for it. In any case, a summer or so later, Julie, was a really nice lady. She said, "I want to have a Jaws thing." And for like 6 months, they had an exhibit at the museum. And it was really interesting because she wanted to use some of my originals. And, collectors said, "Oh, you can't use the originals. They're worth thousands of dollars." I had no idea how much they're worth for collectors of the original storyboard. But I put about 12 out there, and we had some huge ones. Greg Nicotero, who did the foreword to the book, he built 3 characters, the 3 Jaws characters. I mean, so lifelike, with hair on their arms and stuff. And we had a big shark head, and we had the original cage, and it went on for 6 months, April to September. And so that's when Dennis did this book, and they would sell it there. One quick story. So I'm there, and we're going to screen Jaws on a big screen outside, and at night. So she introduced me to the audience, and I said, "Fine, thank you." So I thought I'll just leave, But then she said, "Oh, and then Joe will talk about this after the screening." So my wife saved a couple seats for us, and Dennis sat here. My wife sat next to me, and I watched the movie. I got to tell you, Keith, I watched the movie for the first time on a big screen without thinking about what I did, about the shark working. I just watched it as a movie, and I was so impressed with the 3 guys on the boat and the directing and the relationship, because basically it's about 3 guys, the crusty old boat, fishermen, the sort of ichthyologist, kid, and then a cop that didn't even want to be on the boat. And then you have a monster, and it was really I was so impressed without thinking about because I was always thinking, oh, the shark looked good, doesn't look good. Is this good angle? Oh, the water is rough here, it's smooth here. Just forgot about that. Just watched the movie. Dennis was sitting next to me. I said, this is a pretty damn good movie.
Well, I'm sitting next to him going, wow, I'm sitting here watching Jaws next to Joe Alves. This is pretty wild. Right?
I can't imagine. Now, Dennis, you were afraid to watch Jaws when it came out.
Yeah.
Petrified, actually.
I had this terrible fear of monsters, and yet I was the monster kid in my 5th grade class, building Aurora monster models and stuff like that, because I'm trying to tackle this situation, this overcome this fear. And here comes Jaws. Okay. And everyone's talking about Jaws. Now, we read the book, and in 8th grade, during finals week, after you do your final, everyone sit quietly and do something or read a book or something. And so many of the kids had Jaws in their hands. And we're all reading the paperback version of Jaws. And just reading the good parts, when the Kinder Boy gets killed and when Chrissy gets killed and this kind of stuff. And anyway, I was afraid to see the film when the film came out because I heard it was really quite terrifying. And all my buddies from school wanted to know, how come you haven't seen Jaws? You love all these scary movies. And ultimately, I made my way down there with a friend and saw in the preface of the book. And I was terrified, and yet I was hooked. No pun intended. It's just, for me, it's become just that, another pun, quintessential picture in my life of why I like film so much. And when anyone asks me, hey, what's your favorite film? Jaws. Then we can talk about some other ones, because there's a lot of great film out there, but Jaws, definitely.
Interesting point, Keith. Because this was in the 70s. 70s were an incredible year for movies. When you, Close Encounters, Star Wars, Godfathers. Anyway, what I had noticed is Dennis is mid-50s, Greg Nicotero is mid-50s. I just did a podcast with Keith Smith, who just turned 50. So a lot of filmmakers were in very early age when Jaws came out. Jaws 1, 2, and 3. Some of them really were like 13 at 3, so they're even more familiar with that. But so I forgot about sharks after 3 Jaws movies. And then it was probably the 30th anniversary, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I met Jim Beller at Martha's Vineyard. And he said, well, why don't you sell these copies? Because I used to give copies away. Well, everything I had to Greg Nicotero and various people who were big Jaws fans. And it didn't happen. Nobody really cared. I mean, today it's unbelievable. I get, oh, would you sign this? I mean, it's come alive again. And I think it's because influential people were very influenced by it. Filmmakers now today, like Greg, that does Walking Dead and Chiller and stuff like that, they were influenced today. And that's why the book is interesting today, because you've got people that it started their own career, right, and being influenced by those movies.
Yeah,
absolutely. Jaws was a huge influence on me as well, as an artist, and living in a coastal community that relies on tourism. Can completely identify with the storyline. But obviously, I think the majority of the biggest fans of Jaws out there are actually more, they hold more in their heart for the production of Jaws and how it came to be, this story of the beast that seemed to be pieced together based on necessity and things working and not working, which I think you could probably tell us a little bit about how things actually were working, as opposed to the common theories.
I have to defend the shark. I got to tell you, and I'll try to do this quickly. But I was a staff art director. I was doing a television movie there, and I get a call from David Brown, who was a producer with Zanuck and Brown, heavyweight producers. This being Butch Cassidy, Santana Six, but they also did this small movie called Sugarland Express. And they didn't have a charge number. These guys are pretty, how should I say, tight with the money. And they didn't have a charge number. David's wife, Helen Gurley Brown, who was editor of Cosmopolitan, had read the galley sheets of this book called Jaws, the new writer, young writer. And she said to David, I think this would make a good movie. So he called me and he said, Joe, I got this galley sheet. He said, if you could do some illustrations so we could sell this movie to the studio, because the studio didn't know anything about it. So as an art director, you could do an occasional drawing, but if you're going to do a lot of drawings, you have to hire an illustrator. But they didn't have a charge of money. They couldn't hire anybody. So I went to the head of the art department, Alex Galitzin, and I told him that, David Brown, he said, just do it. Nobody's going to know. You do your television show and draw in between. So basically, I did about 30 illustrations. Most of them are in the book. And they were based on activities, shark activities, on the book. So what's interesting is Marshall Green, we had a meeting. In fact, I have a little note. Dennis is so flipped out because I saved everything. And I had a little note from Mary who answers the phone. And she says, meeting with Marshall Green, October 3rd, 10 o'clock, Jaws. So that is the beginning. And he was so being around, oh my God, I got this, put this in the book. I said, piece of scrap paper. Yeah, but it was the beginning. So Stephen, when I was doing this, was not assigned to the movie. He wanted to do, I don't know, a pirate thing, but they had some other director in mind, but he kept calling it a whale, not a shark, but they had no deal. There was no money yet. So we had this meeting with all the department heads. And Marshall Green sort of liked this project because he lived on a boat and he was a really cool guy. So basically, Stephen had that time been brought on. And when we were talking before anybody was on it, he said, if we ever did this movie, we should do a big shark in the real ocean. Because I think we saw Old Man in the Sea and Spencer Tracy, and there was a marlin that they did on the back lot with the backdrop, looked terrible. So real ocean, big shark. So we had come to conclusion something like 25 feet. And I'll tell you why later. It was exactly 25 feet. So I did my big spiel, and everybody listened. And then so Marshall turned to the effects department and said, can you make the shark? And the effects department there said, no, we can't do that. No one's ever made a shark that big and in the real ocean. Besides, we got bigger movies to do like the Hindenburg. And Marshall got very upset and he said, Jaws could be a bigger movie than the Hindenburg, and everybody laughed. Of course it could. This is George C. Scott, big movie. So as I was packing up, everybody left. He called me in. He called me over to his desk. He says, can you get the shark made? And I thought, oh, sure. Young and ambitious. He said, well, okay, but take it off the lot. Now, everything was done in the house, in the lot. He said, take it off the lot, find a crew, and basically do it that way. So after talking to various people, Disney said it would take a year or so, but they wouldn't take it to the ocean. Joe Lombardi, who did he says he was busy, but it would take about a year and a half. I found Bob Matty, who did the giant squid in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he was so ambitious. He was just 65 years old, but very gung-ho kind of thing. And he said, yeah, we could do it, blah, blah, blah. All right, that was probably October, November, maybe we started putting a team together. The book came out in February. That was 73. The book came out in 74, a couple months later. And the studio said, we got to start shooting in 2 months. So Where's the year and a half to make the shark? There's the problem. And we never really tested it. We got it back there, and if it worked, we shot it. If it didn't, it was a test. That's how the problems. You want to add to that, Dennis?
No, like I said, one thing that you've talked about before as well is that with all the storyboards, which folks can see in the book, with all the storyboards, you storyboarded what you and Stephen decided you wanted the shark to do.
Exactly.
And you guys got every shot that you storyboarded. So if there's any kind of notion the shark didn't work, well, then how did we get all these shots that we storyboarded that we intended to get? So congratulations.
Yeah, critics like to say that we didn't use the shark enough. Like when Chrissy gets pulled around, Stephen didn't want the shark there. When the doc leaves and turns around, do you know the shark's under there? When we use the barrels, the critics say, "Oh, we used the barrels because we didn't have the shark wasn't working." No, that was real a Hitchcock kind of thing. There was a barrel. Oh my God, there must be a shark down there. So and as Dennis said, in the hundreds of storyboards, we storyboarded all the shark activity, and we got every shot with the shark. And so I get a little upset at the criticism that the shark didn't work. Now let me just say this: the shark wasn't ready, so Stephen had to shoot everything, walk and talk and stuff without the shark. And then I would go to Bob Matty. We had 3 sharks, right to left, left to right, that we pulled 300 feet away. And then we had a platform shark that would sink, and then it was on a track, and it would gimbal and stuff. So the point is, I would go to Bob and I say, "Bob, what's working?" And he said, "I think maybe the left to right." So I'd go to Stephen and we'd look at the sketches and say 183 A, B, and C. Okay, so we would post that to everybody who had, a big production office. We had all those copies of that. We said, "We're doing these tomorrow." And then I said, "If it works, we shoot it. If it's not, it's a test." So that was when the shark flew by the boat, and you see how big it is. And so basically, that's the way it went. We would just, it was. So we were over schedule, over budget. We were not heroes. So a lot of people, producers, and even Stephen at one time was, "Oh, well, it's because of the shark. That's why we're over budget, over schedule." So it was not looked upon as a good movie. We were not heroes when we came back. They took the sharks, they threw it in the back lot, let them rot. They sold the orca for cheap to a grip. And then, we continued on, and then the movie came out, and then they didn't have anything for the tour. And that's when we made the Junkyard Shark, which was in the book, the last pages. And they took and made a fiberglass shark out of the original mold and hung it up so people could take pictures with it. And Greg Nicotero said he did when he was 16, took a picture. And so that thing went away. And after a while, when we built the shark ride or routine, the Jaws thing, and some guy with a car lot. In car lot, you go buy parts from. And he had it hanging up for years, and then a guy, Corey Turner from NPR, about 9 years ago, called me and wanted to verify it was really shark made from the boat. And I got Roy Arbogast there, and he said, "Yes, it is." And then a couple of years later, a lady from was soon to be the Motion Picture Museum said, "We'd like to buy the shark and have it restored." And then I got Greg Nicotero involved, and you see the last 2 pages of the book. Greg redid it, and so that's going to go to the museum. So, okay. story.
So originally, when you put a lot of your drawings in front of Stephen to kind of help convince him that this was a movie to be made, you had gotten a lot of your inspiration from things like Blue Water, White Death, which is a huge. I love that documentary. This is extremely well done. I can actually see in some of your drawings some influence.
Oh,
from
yeah, and I used to talk to
Valerie Taylor's photos.
Valerie Taylor. They were great. They were a lot of help. But the guy that really, when it got serious, when we knew we were going to make the movie, and I did that 4-foot model that's in the book, clay model, it was Leonard Campagno. Leonard Campagno was a great ichthyologist. He was known for sharks. I met with the Steinhardt Oceanographical Studies in San Francisco, and I went to see him. And he came down and he actually worked on that model. So when people say, was the shark accurate? I mean, it was his fingers that took the clay and detailed. I had the thing laid out and he said, oh, you do this, and then nose is denticles and stuff. And then he told me this. He said, white sharks, when they get bigger, they generally, because Ronald Valley Taylor said the biggest they could get was maybe 16 feet. There have been known sharks 20 feet or remains of them. But what Leonard was telling me is that a perfect shaped shark is about 12 feet. As they get bigger, they get girthier. And we didn't want a fat shark. So I took a 12-foot shark, and that was my model. And then we doubled it. And how we did this is sort of interesting. Is the studio wanted to know how big this shark's going to be. So I had this guy in the drafting room, John Lorenzo, draw just a line drawing of a 20-foot shark and a 30-foot shark. And we put them down in the parking lot, underneath the parking lot. And we had the executives come down. And the producers and Sid Sheinberg and these various people. And so they looked at, and Stephen and I were there, and we knew we wanted a 25-foot shark. They said, oh, the 20 doesn't look that good. Again, the 30 just looks too monstrous. And I said, how about something in between? How about 25? And they said, oh, yeah, that's good. So now we did this for a couple of reasons, because we had their okay to make a 25-foot shark. And that way they couldn't say, oh, it was too small, it was too big. Oh, you guys agreed, you know. Got anything to add to that, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I think you handled it extremely well. And the funny thing is, I will say this, if I can just speak to the size of the shark. I had seen the copy of the head that Greg Nicotero done a long time ago. It's just the head. It's like, wow, that thing's, really big, right? But I had never seen the full-bodied shark. And when we got a chance to see that junkyard shark that Joe's discussing being restored over Nicotero's studio, I walk in, I look at it and said, yeah, that head is really big. And then I walked past the pectoral fin and realized, wow, I could lay on that comfortably. And then I walked past the belly and it's just like tremendous. And then I walked back to the tail and it's a 6-foot tail, point to point. And so I'm kind of uttering this stream of expletives as I'm going down past this shark, finally realizing how large this thing really is. It's just practically overwhelming. And that was the point when I turned to Joe and I said, God, and you made one of these things move in the water? I mean, it's just enormous.
It's interesting. I want to mention the movement when we started to do a few tests, and in fact, it's in the book, a comment about with Ron and Valerie Taylor talking in Verna Fields.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. Valerie was really cute, really sweet. Anyway, so we had a test of the shark swimming, and we were watching that on Verna's Kim and showing that to them, Ron and Valerie. And Valerie said, Joe, you don't have to move it that much. The big shark doesn't wag its tail. It sort of just floats until it wants to attack, right? And So we learned a lot from them. Of course, Blue Water White Death, but we learned a lot from them as to the movement of the shark. You don't over move it, right? You know that, Keith.
It's a very efficient design,
Right.
the real thing.
And to the point that Joe's making, and did the shark work? Yeah, according to Ron and Valerie Taylor, the experts behind Blue Water White Death, his shark worked a little bit too well. It moved too much. I think that's a testament to the engineering, the design and the engineering behind that shark.
Do you know the story about Ron and Valerie Taylor's involvement?
Tell us.
Okay, Dick Zanuck was very concerned that maybe the shark wouldn't work or wouldn't be real enough, and so we need some real footage. I knew one thing is I couldn't get a shark swimming away because you would see all the mechanism. So I thought maybe a few shots of the shark swimming away or like that. So talked to Valerie and Ron. They said the biggest shark that they could photograph would be 16 feet. So we wanted to get a shot of the shark and the cage, and the shark approaching the cage with Dreyfus in it. Because in the book, Dreyfus and he gets killed. He gets eaten in the book. So I built a small cage, and I found a stunt guy. He said he could do all this stuff. It was about 4'6". So relatively, not the Dreyfus, he's about 5 feet. Anyway, a smaller person, the bigger shark, and a smaller cage would give me a relative size relationship. So I had to get a suit for him, and I asked for smaller tanks so it would be relative to the big tanks. So I built the cage and the tanks, and we sent him down with a crew, or basically Frank Arrigo was a production manager on that, and Ron and Valerie had a crew to shoot the underwater stuff. So they put the little guy in the water, and the big 16-foot shark attacks the cage, and he flips out and he sucks all the air out immediately, and they pull him up, and he runs and he hides, and he says, "I am not doing this." In the meantime, they're shooting underwater, and then the shark decides there's a cage, a soft cage, which is full size, on the side of the boat, and it starts hitting the cage and breaking the cage. Well, that footage is so incredible. My God, because it was just incredible footage that we could use, but there's no Dreyfus. Dreyfus gets eaten, but he doesn't get eaten because he's gone. So Stephen and everybody decided to change the script. So because first of all, when Carl Gottlieb came on, he took the book and he made it much more linear. I mean, we got a lot of the mafia in there, and the love affair with the wife and the Dreyfus character, and it just made it more streamlined. The problem is the beaches, can't go in the water, and the mayor say, "Yeah, we can't, we got to go in the water, or we won't have any business," and blah blah blah. And then the three guys. So it's solidified into a simpler concept. And so now the Dreyfus character, this wonderful shots we have to use. So change it. Dreyfus drops the needle, goes down, and he hides. And then they come up together and they swim, and that was great. And so
great sequence.
Another story.
I do have one more question for you before we get into some of the public comments. I wanted to ask how you ended up becoming second unit director for the Kittner scene.
Yeah, that was interesting because obviously I was everything that was shot with the shark. I was there. All the walk and talk stuff, I would be back in the office doing storyboards. So, but when it was involved the shark, and there were some shots to be picked up. Verna was getting some of the barrels running and stuff, and Stephen was sort of, I mean, it was tiresome. I got to tell you, sitting on that boat waiting for something to work, and I really learned that on Jaws 2 when I directed 85 Days in the Second Unit, waiting for hours and hours. So he was exhausted, and he said, "Joe, I've got one shot left. You can get it. Tell you, it's the Kittner boy getting little Kittner boy on the raft, which we used a dummy, and the shark coming up." And so it was relatively a simple shot, except it wasn't. It was foggy in the morning, and I had to use the platform shark, and I had to locate it with radar, and I had kids in the foreground. Anyway, so that was my first attempt at directing, which led to the other stuff. But yeah, then I came home. Stephen was then working on the editing, and then we did some pickup shots. Well, we went to the tank at MGM Tank. We got photographs of that, where we did the underwater stuff with a stunt guy that represented Dreyfus. So,
Well, thank you for sharing your stories, Joe. Dennis, I have to say, this is an absolutely beautiful presentation. This book, Designing Jaws. You can find it on Amazon. Take a look for it. It is chock full of Joe's illustrations, and really the best part are those little lost items, those memos, those original notes and drawings. Just being able to see just the intimate little messages and notes, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. Joe wants to add to that.
In there that I didn't think why we needed it, but in the old days, you got a script and you got yellow line paper, and you started breaking it down scene by scene by scene, and then describing in that scene if there was any specific stuff that you needed to do. And so I saved all that, and he said, "Oh no, people like this."
There's a beautiful thing that happens to his point. One, for what I'm doing, which is now kind of a historian on the picture, is any artifacts you can find are just gold. I mean, it keeps filling in gaps. And as much as we know, there's still a lot we don't know or haven't been revealed, But the interesting thing about what's happening there with the sketches that he presented at the beginning, commissioned by David Brown, and then we go into the script breakdown, okay? You'll see the evolution of the story. And to what Joe pointed out about the shot that the Taylor's got at Dangerous Reef with the empty cage, with the shark, you'll see an evolution through the book of the story that goes from novel into a script treatment by Benchley, into some location shooting, into a little more adjustments into the final picture. And so there's stories within the story of this book, which really tells you how all the action and how the characters evolved.
Well, with tomorrow being the 45th anniversary of Jaws, everybody should be picking up this book and reading your stories. Dennis, is a great presentation, and I love the way you've written it. Joe, thank you again for all your stories. Hope to chat with you again soon and see a little bit more of what you're working on.
Okay.
So with that, I'm going to conclude the interview, and hopefully we'll catch up again. I don't have any questions in the listing, so
Okay,
I'll get back to you if any more questions pop up that we need really good answers to.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope to have you both down here in Rhode Island. Come to visit the Living Sharks Museum when you're out this way. Show you some of the memorabilia we have stashed away in our archives.
I have to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Keith.
Okay, Keith.
Thank you. Enjoy the day.
Bye-bye.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for stopping in and watching another episode of In the Fighting Chair. Really awesome to have Joe Alves here and Dennis Prince. We've been very, very lucky to have so many awesome guests. Looking forward to our next one. Definitely make sure that you visit Joe's website, joealvesmovieart.com, also, where you can get a chance to procure one of your own pieces of Joe Alves' work, and many signed items there on the website too. Check out the book on Amazon, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much for watching.